Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another American Grit with me, Tim Jensen. Man, I got to tell you, I always catch myself saying we got a special show for you or something great, but I think this one is going to be incredible, and I'm going to tell you why. We have with us a living legend. We have somebody that is an inspiration to so many people across the United States for many, many years, to women, to individuals that are part of this country that are wanting to stand up and do something and make a difference. Mae Krier. She's been leading the way. You may know her as one of the many Rosie the Riveters, 97 years young, our guest today on American Grit. Mae, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
My pleasure to be here.
It is absolutely incredible. We were just sharing before the show how some of the great things that you've been involved in throughout the span of your lifetime. So many incredible moments. But it all started back in Seattle, Washington.
Right.
Many years ago.
It started many years before that because I come from a pioneer family.
Oh, my goodness. Well, let's hear it from the very beginning, Mae.
Well, yeah, it was amazing because my great-grandparents pioneered here from Austria. And they when they got here, they met up with whoever and encourages the pioneers were to settle. And they settled in what was called the Dakota Territory then, which was a barren wasteland. I often wondered why they picked the Dakota Territory. But, when you grow up with a family of pioneers, you're strong people. And it was just a great background for me. We learned how to do things. We learned how to persevere.
Right.
We didn't give up.
Right, that true sense of grit.
Right, and we went through the Great Depression, the Dust Bowl, the stock market crash. That was all in the decade when I was born.
Right.
But the good thing that came out of it was my mother got the right to vote. And I said, why did they ever, how come the women didn't get that right to vote?
Right.
But, like I said, with us, with so many women going into the factories, we opened so many doors for people. And I said, that's great. And now what the women are doing, we're just so proud.
Right. Yeah, that's absolutely right. The suffrage period, we opened the doors for so many.
Right.
At the early part of the 20th century, and you were part of that, right? You were growing up in that time period, and at least seeing your parents,
right,
and your mother.
They made the first footprints, but they didn't have the numbers of women to have the power behind them. And boy, there is power in numbers.
Right.
And that was amazing because when we started to do this program, I started alone when I was working to get Rosie recognized. And another woman teamed up with me, and we just went after these women to support what all these other women are doing, and the young girls especially.
Yeah.
And boy, we got the best results.
Yeah,
absolutely. But like I said, there's power in numbers.
There is, and we've seen that in all throughout our history of America, right? As groups of individuals, gather together to put a voice to something.
I know,
right? And it's amazing when it really happens.
One of the things I love to tell is when we got the Congressional Gold Medal, and I was very instrumental in getting it off the ground.
Sure.
And we got the House very easy, but we had a terrible time getting the Senate. And we had 29 co-sponsors, but we needed 60. And so it just sat dormant for the longest time. And so Deb and I, this is the lady I work with that helps me so, we put it on a Rosie, and we named all of the ones in the different states who hadn't co-sponsored for us. And we told the women, go get them. And we laughed so because I said we just sigged the dogs on them, and we got 73 votes in no time at all.
That's incredible.
Senator Casey called me. He said, Mae, how did you do that? I said, we just sigged the dogs after them.
Yeah, that's right. That's how you get them to listen.
I know. Yeah.
Right. So let's go back. You come from a family of pioneers. You trudged across the Great Plains into the Dakota Badlands. The barren of the most. So bad that's where they put all the Indians. Right after they moved them across the country, and your family perseveres. Right. And then World War II happens. And all the men of the country are being drafted in droves and being sent off to Europe or the Pacific to fight in the greatest battle since World War I. And that's leaving the women and the young to really keep the country going,
right.
To build the war machine, to build all the things that were necessary just to keep the economy going, right? And then we needed all the efforts to build the machine to supply all of the beans, the bullets, the Band-Aids, as they say. What was that like? Being hired on at the beginning of that, and you're watching all the men, going and leaving the country.
Right.
What was going through your mind at that time period?
Well, I came from a very small town in North Dakota, and when Pearl Harbor was declared, when they bombed Pearl Harbor, every young man in our town just enlisted right away, and that just took the heart right out of our community, which was so many of the small towns through the Middle West. And I can remember the day that we put my brother on the train. My father was a very happy storytelling man. And I come home after we put my brother on the train. I came home and here I found my father crying. I never got over that feeling. But you realize that all over the country, the mothers and fathers are putting their sons and daughters, but sons mostly at that time, on trains. And they're going home crying, and many of those boys never returned. Yeah. Whereas I was fortunate, so was my husband. Their brothers all came home safe. So it was a sad time in our lives. But as soon as the men left, now the women had to fill those jobs. And my one uncle decided to enlist too. And he was a rural mail carrier, if you're familiar with that. Out in the Middle West there was no electric out in this country. Mm-hmm. And if you're familiar with those bitter winters in the Middle West, you'll know what a challenge it was when they gave that job to my mother. I think she was probably one of the very first Rosies. And she used to take the mail out in the country, and the farmers kind of timed her. They figured if she didn't come, they'd go looking for her, maybe on a tractor or horse or something.
Right.
But I remember one particular blizzard she got caught in, and she had to stay there for a couple of days because they couldn't get her back into town. Well, there's no communication at all. My father didn't know that she was in a snowbank or she was dead or alive. But these were the things we did. We dropped everything. Every man, woman, and child did what it took. Yeah. For us to save our country. Yeah, and it was incredible. As simple as that,
we live in a time today where everything is served to us in a little device that we carry in our pocket.
I know,
right? And we sometimes forget the luxuries that we have because it was only a century ago, right? That we didn't have electricity in the Dakotas, and there was no form of communication other than the wire, right? Mm-hmm. And some Morse code that's going over a telephone.
The small towns, they had electric in the towns, but the rural area had nothing like that. I believe that was a federal job. I'm not too sure, but they just gave it to my mother because it needed to be done.
Right.
And that was the way we lived. And people don't realize, young people today don't realize when we went through the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl, we were lucky to have a roof over our head or food on the table. It didn't matter what it was food. It was called survival, and it wasn't easy, Yeah. But I remember the day so well when Pearl Harbor was bombed. My sister was a Sunday, and my sister and I had been to a matinee. And we came home, and our folks were sitting by the radio very upset. And we said, what had happened? They said Japan had bombed Pearl Harbor. I was a teenager, and I stood there, and I said, I don't think I know where Pearl Harbor is. I thought I was the only one, but I travel now with the veterans. I find out so many of the veterans will say the same thing. Yeah. We weren't sophisticated about the rest of the world.
Sure, yeah. Mm-hmm. It was a very, everything was done by newspaper. Right?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And if you were in a community of enough people, you had a school.
And we never heard of most of those islands that they're fighting in now, like Guadalcanal, Midway, Guam, all of those islands. We used to have to go to the theater. They had Pathé News.
Right.
And that's how we learned. We'd see about the battles. We'd hear about them, but it didn't mean anything because, you can't visualize what these men are going through.
Right. Yeah, there's those, those telewire, broadcasts that seemed like it was propaganda. Like, here in the Solomon Islands, United States Marines from Illinois, land on the beach. It's kind of crazy. But, those things were also, to your point, educating people that just had no idea where, Guadalcanal was or what was the beaches of Normandy. Where Normandy what?
Yeah, right? Well, my brother was on Leyte, where he's the Navy. That's where he was. And he said, that's where all the suicide bombings are, a lot of them in all those islands. But he says, you've never lived till you've seen one of those kamikaze planes coming at your ship.
Right.
So,
yeah.
I mean, that
terrifying.
It is.
Terrifying. Yeah. So you're seeing all of your family, starting to list. Pearl Harbor has happened. Everybody's scratching their heads like, what's next? What happens now, right? And so everybody starts, going off. And What are you going through? You're watching your mom to pick up all these jobs. You're watching all the other females in your community, picking up the jobs as well. And you're coming to age. You're now needing to start to contribute. What's going through your mind?
Well, school was out just in May, and we decided, my girlfriend and my sister and I decided to go to Seattle for the summer. We thought that would be a lark, never thinking that we'd get involved and how patriotic we would become.
Yeah.
And I said to you, it was just amazing. When we went into Boeing, they took us downtown for 2 weeks training. We hired in at Boeing because we knew they were taking anybody off the street. They needed employees so bad. And so they took us downtown. They put a piece of sheet metal in a vise and showed us how to drill and how to rivet. And, of course, we had the bucker's the one that seals the rivet. And we had 2 weeks training right into the factory to build these big bombers, the B-17s and the B-29s. That's what I worked on.
That's incredible. So you go to Seattle for vacation, but you end up
we thought it'd
signing
be
up
fun,
with Boeing.
and we stayed the rest of the war.
That is incredible.
We all became Rosies.
Yeah. What would your mom say? You're writing letters home. What did
Well,
the family?
it's funny. I've had people say, "What did your mother think, 17-year-old going away like that?" And I said, "Well, first of all, we were going to go with my girlfriend's father was out there trying to get housing because the housing was terrible. There's so many people coming in at once.
Yeah.
So he was setting up housing, and then the rest of the family hadn't come out yet. So that's why we stayed there for the summer. Now we had a place to go to. But when the summer was over and the family moved out, my sister and I had to get a place of our own.
Yeah.
And everybody was renting rooms. They had everything, everything was available, or I should say, they needed every room that was available because there's so many people coming in all at once.
Oh, yeah. Now, so you're building some of the biggest bombers in the American fleet, right? This is incredible. I would, during that time period, we went through the 20-year war, right? We went the global war on terrorism, right? Nothing to the sense of what was the need during the 40s where, the whole economy had to shift to start building all of these things. You're putting rivets into a bomber. What are you thinking? Like, this plane's going over the boys that are going to be on this plane. Are you thinking about all that? Are all the people similarly aligned? I'm just so curious about the environment and what people were thinking when you're building these machines.
Well, so many of us were so young. When we went to Normandy to celebrate the 75th anniversary, there was 5 of us Rosies, and 3 of us were 17, 18 years old when we started. It wasn't uncommon at all. People seemed to be surprised.
Right.
But no, because we got out of school earlier, we started school when we were so young. And I said it was fun because with my own case, I was a tomboy, so it was easier for me to climb around those planes than it was my sister. She was more of a lady. And it was just amazing to think that what we did as young people, what we learned and what we did, and after the summer was over, as you were beginning, they gave you 3 months without joining the union because I guess that's pretty common for the summertime. The kids come out and work. But after that, as we worked and realized what we were doing and why we were doing it, we became so patriotic. Yeah. And we just did everything we could in the importance of one rivet, what one rivet meant to do a huge plane like that. And it was one day, it was so nice. I guess I'm not sure why we were off there. I worked in the wing and in the nacelle. That's where the engine goes. And we were off the platform for some reason. I guess they were moving the wing to attach it to the body. And Senator Hap Arnold, who's a 5-star general, it was the Army Air. We didn't have an Air Force yet. He walked through and he stopped and he talked to us and he shook our hands and we were just so impressed. And now when I go I've been invited to Pentagon quite a few times. In fact, they gave me my 93rd birthday party there. Oh, incredible. And they're so impressed that I shook Hap Arnold's hand because they said the Pentagon, he is it in the Pentagon, Hap Arnold. And they laughed because I'm the only one in there that day that's ever shook hands with him. But it was funny because I was so young, and I don't think I even realized how important he was.
Sure.
But it was fun. But he made us feel like what we were doing was great. He gave us that feeling of we were really important.
Yeah.
And we were. We were.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Not only for the personal things that you were involved in, but in the total collective and all the work that was being done. It could, the war effort would never have happened. We would never have been able to do what we accomplished. In 1944, you were a part of the 5,000th unit.
And I wish I'd have brought it. I brought the pictures of it to Brandy. I want to show her. My name is on that 5,000 plane.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so is my sister's. And I'm in the picture. It was so funny because I knew exactly where I was in the picture. And of course, you put that picture away for 50 years.
Yeah.
And now I'm not sure which one's me.
Sure. Yeah.
But it's still there, and I'm proud of it. And it was cute because when the newspaper did my first story, they called it my love affair with my B-17 because I always liked the B-17s.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Like I fell in love with it as a young man when the movie Memphis Belle.
Yeah, well, I just was out in Ohio this last year, and they took me right. I was everything but climbed right in it, because of my experience with the B-17s.
You could probably walk around blindfolded.
Well, to make it even better, Harry Connick. I was on Harry Connick's show, and he played the tail gunner in that movie.
Yeah.
And it was so funny because I had fun with him that day. I had gotten my first ride in a B-17 about 72 years after it was made. And it was so funny because I said to Harry, how in the world did you ever get in that tail? Because inside of those B-17s are so small.
Right.
And we had a good time talking about it.
I can only imagine. That's incredible. Oh. Now, is that plane still in existence? Is it held
No,
somewhere?
it was dismantled. They tried to save it, but they couldn't get enough boats. They used it. It's made 78-year trips over Europe.
Oh, wow.
Even with that, see, first of all, they weren't going to let it go with all those signatures on it because everything was camouflaged at that time.
Yeah.
And they decided for morale reasons they would. And we heard later that some pilots fought over who was going to get to fly it. But when it came back, they used it to sell war bonds, things like that.
Yeah.
And then after a while, it was scrapped in Kingsman Air Force Base in Arizona. And the man from Boeing, I used to keep in touch with, the historian, he sent me a picture of it being dismantled. And I wish that I had gone there maybe just to see it for the last time. But you don't think of these things at that time.
Sure. Now that's a great. You'd mentioned something there, and I wanted to. I'm talking to source, and I've been always curious. In as being somebody that loves history, the way history has painted the Rosie the Riveter has been almost in the sense that was a part or a major contributor to the war bond effort that was happening during that time period. Share. I'd love to know, like really, what was that relationship? Was it the government, truly just doing that, using the Rosie the Riveters to go out and to raise that awareness? Was it earnest? Was it really authentic, or were they just profiteering off of it?
Well, when the first one came out, it was Norman Rockwell's, but that one looked more like the shipyard girls. It wasn't what we dressed in, the slacks and blouses or jumpsuits, where the were girls that did the welding in the shipyards. They had the torch, the heavy mask, and all. They had a much harder job.
Right.
But those posters, more or less, they were after the war that they really became famous. The same way with the polka dot bandanas.
Yeah.
We wore anything. Polka dot didn't mean anything at the time. But Miller from Westinghouse made that last one, which became so popular. But he made it mostly just to make the real women realize, femininity, and make them realize what they could do, because they had no idea how capable. And up until 1941, they had no idea how capable American women were. And there wasn't anything we couldn't do or wouldn't tackle. And we were good. Sometimes we were better than the men.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't just a matter of where we were working, what kind of rivet gun we were using, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one of the things I just love was the women that we work with, especially the older women. I was a teenage kid. I was thinking about, what am I going to wear to dance tonight, that kind of thing.
Right.
And one of the women in particular, was quite a few of them, they were called Gold Star mothers. They were a mother who lost a son. And they didn't quit working because they lost a son. They said, I don't want another mother to lose a son because he doesn't have the equipment he needs.
Yeah.
And I thought that's a great woman. That's wonderful. And of course, we had so many women that lost their husbands, widows. And you band together with them. You feel bad because they still stuck right in there, and they're what our country needed.
Yeah, and I imagine it's what they needed at that time as well. Like you create such a
even
network.
Young people. I said before the war, they were selling scrap to Japan, scrap metal, which was a mistake because they made weapons to use against us.
Right.
But every man, child, and woman and child just dropped everything and did what they could. there was no job too small or too big for us. We did what had to be done.
Yeah.
And it was
Yeah.
so important.
And it was, and it soon, became a national iconic message. And, the influence that you were bringing to young women across the United States that were saying, I can grow up and now do anything that I want, right? It was just 10 years ago. I couldn't vote. Now you're telling me I can go and do anything I want. Like, then that I think started your advocacy work.
Well, yeah, because don't forget, we made no money before. It was a Great Depression.
Right.
And we had stock market crash, the Dust Bowl. There was no money available. We were lucky to put food on the table. And so naturally, now we're making money. And that was big bucks at the time, 92 cents an hour. Wow. But, it was after the war, they wanted to go back to 50 cents an hour. That was the average age for a factory worker, but they had so many strikes.
Yeah.
I mean, the people weren't satisfied to go back. Well, of course, this is the men coming home from war now. They're going back to their jobs. Like my husband worked for Westinghouse before the war. And naturally, they were very good to their enlisted men. He had a job to come home to,
Right.
which many didn't have. But the women, they were out on the street. When the war was over, they'd give them their a time card, and the next day they go to the paymaster, collect their money, and that was it, period.
Yeah.
That was sad for those women, especially the widows.
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. They lost everything.
Yeah.
Right? And they contributed and gave everything.
Right, and so often, families had all they could do to survive, and there wasn't a way they could go home again. It was just a sad time for a lot of them.
Unbelievable. And, I think one of the things that I've always found remarkable from this time period and people of your generation has been, you met your husband in 1945, a Navy veteran.
I met him in 1944.
1944, there you
Yeah, I
go.
was a sailor. What could he dance? We met in the Servicemen's Center in Seattle, Washington. We used to go to the USO, too. And in fact, I was just in Washington, and the lady from the National USO came up to me, and she started talking to me, and she said, I had read an article, somebody gave it to me, I never even seen it. It says 5 American women who should be household names, and I was one of them.
Oh, my goodness.
And I was so proud. I had no idea that they did it. And she come up to me and talked to me, and she wants to do more. But, it's things like that. It's so rewarding.
Yeah.
And, of course, I like people. And it's nice. When I started this, many people didn't even know who Rosie the Riveter was.
Sure.
I mean, they had no idea. Even some today don't know.
Oh, yeah. It's
Like the younger generation, many of them don't care because they've got it made right now. They don't realize what the men and women did to give them that opportunity.
built off the
what
backs
they have,
of
yeah.
giants. Absolutely. You said your husband was quite the dancer.
Oh, boy, could he dance. We danced our way through life. We were married almost 70 years before he passed away.
Yeah.
And he was a really good dancer. And that was in 1944. We just became good friends. And then 1945, Roosevelt had just died. And in 1945, he was transferred. And we realized that we meant more to each other than we thought. So then we were married in 1945.
That's great.
And we were transferred to another base where it was a naval air station. And so I went to work with the Army engineers, and we had the Italian prisoners of war compound on the base. And they used to come in and work with us. And that was quite an experience. I always remember that. Some spoke fairly good English, others didn't, but I realized how good we were to our prisoners of war and what they were doing to our men over the seas in Germany and Japan.
Yeah, it's some harrowing stories
Oh,
that
it
can
is.
come out of that.
And one of my memories, I keep thinking, I wish that I had kept in touch with some or found out when they sent them back to Italy. We had German prisoners of war. We have a lot of different prisoners of war camps here in the country. But you want to get your life back together again. We just want this war over, which they did too. They had families they wanted to go back home to, too.
Right,
So-
absolutely. Now, so in this time period, right, the war is over. You're married. You're raising a family. But you're not done working. You're not done doing all the things that is driving your passion, that is your fire, right? It's this advocacy and taking the Rosie idea and moving it further and getting it ingrained into the younger women's of that next generation of the woman. Talk to us about what was going on between after the war and up through the 60s and what you were involved in.
Well, yeah, it was very difficult right after the war. When we came home, my husband, like I said, he had a job at Westinghouse, and they were good to him. But now they're retooling. General Electric, General Motors, Westinghouse, they're all retooling. They quit making more equipment. Now went back to making more radios or whatever they did. And they had a lot of union problems. IUE, and they were getting communists and trying to get infiltrated. And, of course, now the men didn't want to go. We were making 90 cents an hour. The men didn't want to go back to making 50 cents an hour. Right. So we had a lot of strikes. And that was very difficult. Now the war's over, and we got two small children, our baby boomers. And it was difficult. We go right back to where we're going to eat next kind of thing during these strikes. It was difficult for my husband because he was trained as an apprentice at Westinghouse. So they knew that he wasn't going to leave. I mean, so if there was a job available, it was hard to get.
Right.
And so it was really difficult up until, and when the Korean War began, I went back to riveting again for a while because we were in debt from the strikes.
Yeah.
But then after that, it just gradually started getting better, a little bit by bit. It took a while, it took a long time.
Yeah.
But it was a struggle for years after World War II.
Yeah. And your work in the female community, what were you doing there? Continuing to drive this message that we can do anything. Right.
Well, I don't know. It's hard to promote. It's hard to get your message out there. Like I said, I'd write to anybody, everything, radio stations, newspapers, everywhere that I could think of. I'd see something and I'd think, I'd sit down and write a letter to them. Well, most of them would respond. They'd say, thank you for your duty, and that would be the end of it. And one day, the newspaper picked on us several years later, and they did my story, and it just went viral. And I said, why did it take so long for anybody to take notice of what I was saying? And she says, every day we have so much, the editor was saying, we have so many messages and letters and things going across our desk. That day was that was the message we were looking for that particular time of year.
Yeah.
And so that's when it went viral. And I, from then on, it was just, It was great. And they called it, after we did a few interviews, they called it my love affair with my B-17.
I love it. And then, so nearly 60 some years later, you're recognized in Congress, for all the work that you've done in that time period. And there's so much. And we could spend hours, talking about all the things that you've been doing.
I said it was funny because we worked so hard. The first one was the National Rosie the Riveter Day. And I went with our congressman and senator. But I said to our Senator Casey, I said, the reason you give us this day is you're getting sick and tired of hearing from me. But don't give up. That's why I try to tell the young girls, don't give up. Yeah. I mean, you might veer off in a different direction, but if something you really want, go back and go for it, because sooner or later you'll get results.
Yeah, I've got a soon-to-be 16-year-old daughter, and we live in a much different world today than we have
totally different
in your time, and even in my time. And the things that I try to get her exposure to is these types of individuals like yourself that have an incredible history in saying, I'm not going to do the status quo. And we're gonna try something different, and we're gonna go out and we're gonna show the world what we can do, and we're not gonna take no for an answer. Mm-hmm. And we certainly aren't going to be pushed aside and marginalized. And I think that's such an important message for people today, because there is so much noise in the world, and we can all do a better job of uplifting each other and saying, hey, we should be giving hands up rather than pushing people down.
Right.
And again, it's only a short 100 years since women had the ability to vote.
Amazing? Yeah.
Right? It's only a short period of time since Black Americans have the freedom to do whatever they want in this country. And it's only a period of time, for whatever other things that that.
And the fact was the women weren't ignorant. That's the part. I noticed my mother knew more about politics and what have you than my father.
Sure.
I remember talking about the Teapot Dome scandal. And that was the famous one during the 1920s.
Yeah.
I remember talking about it. It was some kind of a deal in Wyoming with the oil. I forget what the whole story was. And I thought to myself, here my mother is discussing these problems of the world, and that she didn't have the right to vote,
Yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible, right? And
well, when you're talking about the young people, I think the most important thing that you can bring into your life, your marriage for yourself, is respect.
Yeah.
if you respect yourself, you're going to respect other people, their property, their likes and dislikes. You don't have to agree with them, but you have to respect the right that they have the right to be who they are.
That is some sage advice, man.
Right. And it's funny because after the war, they had these classes the GIs had their things, but we had like school classes that are 10-week, 12-week. We'd take anything like automobile mechanics for women or great books or different things like that. And I knew nothing about psychology at all. And we didn't, in our day, we didn't even know what psychology was.
Right.
And I said, it's the funniest thing because I thought my husband was different. And I went to school and I found out he was a man.
Right, he's from Venus or Mars, whatever it is.
But like I said, he had great respect for me, and I think that's the most important thing of all.
Yeah.
I worked with an engineer for 30 years. He was the nicest man, and he used to ask me to get, when he was very active in New Jersey of electrical engineering, and every so often he'd ask me to get a woman to speak at one of those stodgy old meetings. These engineers thought that they were the only one that could do anything.
Right.
And it was amazing the way these engineers would do. The one case was that there was three from Drexel Engineering in Philadelphia, and that's one of the best engineering schools. There were two boys and a woman had graduated higher in her class. When they went to speak to that engineering group, they didn't direct one question to her. They were all to the two young men, and she had graduated higher. That is changing, but that's still got a lot of changing to do.
Yeah.
Just because she was a woman, they figured she wasn't qualified or didn't know.
Yeah. It's there's a lot. We have a lot of work to do in many respects. Right.
One of the things I've worked hard for, and we're getting there, but it's still a long way, is equal pay for the same job, doing the same job.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's I see it all the time. We see it all the time, especially in corporate America. What is the one thing that you would want young women to take away from it? We talked a little bit about respect. We talked a little bit about that idea of getting involved. But for the generation of women that are coming up today that are just going to be coming into 16, 17, 18 years old,
right? Mm-hmm.
Right? They got this whole new world in front of them that none of us know what it's going to be. Right? It's absolutely crazy. But what would your advice be?
Well, that no matter up until just the last few years, if a man and a woman applied for the same job, they always looked at the man first. They didn't even consider the woman. And now that's changing too. But it's just a shame. I did a STEM program. I've done a few of those with different people, but this one was with the CEO of Boeing, our senator, and our congressman, and we had 8 schools and 100 students. And it was a week when astronauts were asking for more women. They wanted more women to get involved. So that was perfect for me to talk to the young girls in the classroom that day because, you have to have an engineering degree. Well, for an astronaut, you don't have to, I guess, I'm not sure what you need to, exactly to become one. But I just made them realize that, if this is a great career for a woman, if this is what she likes, I've always loved the space program, so naturally I promote it.
Right.
And I just think this is great. And the girls have got to realize just because he's the boy sitting next to her, that doesn't make him any more qualified than her. Sometimes our brains work in different ways. So
yeah, it's crazy. I'm 40. I'll be 45 years old this year, and I think my generation, that Generation X, really a lot of the people behind us are really taking advantage of all the things that again, like I said, I mentioned this earlier, that that your generation has paved the way for. I think it was really my generation was the last to see, a lot of these things happen when, Christy McCullough was going to space.
Isn't that amazing?
Right. And all those glass ceilings.
Sally Ride before her,
yeah. Absolutely. And, now these children today are growing up to see that this is just the standard, but, it's still not to where we think it can be. So it's fascinating.
Yeah, well, I had quite an experience. When I started making the Rosie face mask for all the people that had helped us along the way. I'd send them to the senators or the people, the ones next door, anybody who had helped us get our National Rosie the Riveter Day and our Congressional Gold Medal, but we hadn't gotten that yet. And they went viral. They went everywhere. I committed to 5,000. I ended up making 6,000. I had a little bit of help, or maybe for 1,000. And they said, I got the most beautiful letters from all over our country. Right. They're the genuine American people. They're not these radicals that are climbing the Capitol building. Right. Some made you laugh, some made you cry. But that was the most amazing ending for my mask making thing.
Yeah.
And I just loved it. And now I'm still getting all kinds of requests for different things.
Sure.
But like I said, they're the genuine American people. They just don't get out there and fight for what's right.
Yeah,
You know?
absolutely. I mean, I think this is, you've seen many iterations of of government over the years. What is your forecast of the future? What do you think the
scares
future
me.
for this country looks like?
I've lived through 17 presidents, and people would ask me, "Well, who is your and don't forget that Roosevelt was in his fourth term."
Right.
So they'll ask me which one that I favored. I said, well, we were taught to respect our leaders, whether we liked what they were doing or where they went. Well, now we're losing that.
Yeah.
But they asked me who was my favorite, and I said, I think when John Kennedy was running, we had so much fun with that. It wasn't bitter and nasty. I mean, I worked mostly with the Republicans, and I was registered. They used to kid me. They said just because he wears a silk suit and got curly hair, you run out and vote for him. But we had so much fun. There was no bitterness or hatred.
Yeah. That was American royalty, really, for like the first time. Camelot, right?
Right, and it was like a fresh breath of air, it seemed like.
Yeah,
But we know it can be done. I don't know how they're going to correct what's going on now.
Yeah.
It just seems like everybody's lying and cheating and so much is dug up in their past. But of course, we didn't have the news in our day, they didn't tell about who had a girlfriend on the side, things like that,
right.
And they all did, I think.
yes, I believe that to be true.
But here we go back to that respect. I said we were taught to when we were raised, we honored our mother, our fathers, and our flag, our Capitol. When I seen those radicals climb that Capitol building, I realized it's only a building, but it's what represents our country, our life. It's important.
It's a big thing. Respect, right? I think that we as a society have lost it in droves, and I think we could all just respect each other just a little bit more, and this place could be better.
It was funny. I was telling Brandy, it was funny because I said I was out visiting my mother. Was in a nursing home out in the Middle West several years ago, and I had to drive quite a few miles to get to the nursing home. And along the way, I didn't see a napkin or no litter at all along the road. And they're everywhere. I don't know where it is, but everywhere it seems like people just open the car window and throw it out. Yeah. And I realized the reason they don't, because they don't have any McDonald's out there.
Right. No.
But they don't have fast food, that's all changing too. But they didn't, but they still in most of the Middle Western states, they still have that background of respect and take care of what you have. Yeah. You don't have to have a lot, but take care of what you have.
Absolutely. And there you go. I think that's some sage advice. And may you're a national treasure. I think so.
I'm going to go to a program when I get home on the following day. And it was funny because they were the first one to honor my wish, and they sent me to the convention out in California, the National Rosie the Riveter. And it was so nice, and we've done some things together, and we have more fun. And so they gave me a national award last year. And now when I get home the following day, they want me to present it to the first one.
Oh, wow.
And they called me a famous world traveler. I had to laugh because I just come from nowhere. I came out of this from nowhere.
Yeah. Well, that's where heroes come from.
I just wish that my father, especially my father, that was such a storyteller, if they'd know, because he always talked about the moon and the stars. And that was our life. That was our storytelling. Yeah. And I said, I've walked in the Veterans Day Parade in New York with Buzz Aldrin, was a Grand Marshal. I've been to Kennedy Space Center. I've met an astronaut in the Kennedy Space Center. They had a gala fair. I can't imagine the things that I've experienced. I just never had any idea this would happen like this.
Yeah. Well, I would say that you have a bit of your father in you because you are a masterful storyteller.
You know what? I have my mother's drive and my father's personality. And when I was last year, when we were in Washington for the American Veterans Organization, they do a beautiful thing in November in Washington. And we had 3 Rosies there. And when we walked out on the stage, I looked at it and I said, oh, my God, I look just like my mother. Made me proud.
I love it. Listening to your story reminds me of a dear friend of mine, Rosie Torres from Burn Pits 360. She's an incredible individual that defied the odds many years, over a decade, advocating for toxic exposure, fighting for her husband. As he went off to fight the war and came back sick, she picked up the torch and moved that forward, and it was able to pass some of the biggest legislation in veteran history. I think you are an inspiration to many, and we've talked about.
We need people like her because look at just Agent Orange is a good example of what it did to our men, and the government just refused to acknowledge it. But that was only Love Canal. I don't know if you're familiar with these different places, but it takes so long to get the government to open their eyes. In the meantime, we're losing a lot of lives.
Yeah.
And this is sad. And we need strong people like the tourists to promote and work on these things.
Yes, absolutely. She's a blessing from the Lord. That is for sure.
I know.
Absolutely, as you are, and it's an honor to sit from across from you.
Well, mine is more fun along the way.
The trailblazing, nonetheless.
Well, it was cute because last year we were at the Veterans Affair in Washington, and then we went right from there to England with the Greatest Generation, and then we come back on the Queen Mary. And every day on the Queen Mary, they would have the veterans. No, we don't have many World War II that can travel yet, so there were some Vietnam veterans with us. And we just had the best time each day. We'd tell a story, and you'd be surprised how we drew a crowd to tell these stories. If the people would just listen to this. When I sit there, I was amazed at what some of these men had gone through.
Yeah.
When you meet these men on the street, you'd never realize what he did or what they did to save our country.
Yeah.
And that's what the young people don't realize.
Yeah, I remember growing up as a very young man that meeting a World War II veteran was as a gift, right? That you get, if they're willing to impart some of that knowledge and experience upon you, you sat and listened.
That's what I keep preaching to them. Listen to the elder. We're walking history right now. Yeah. Soon we'll be a page in the history book, and there's very few of us left that can get up and go out.
Yeah,
I say Brandy's got her hands full this week.
That's right. That's right. And to your point, I mean, I think there's only 8 or 9 B-17s left.
Yeah.
Right? That's from the time period of 70, 80 years ago. So, Rosie, it's absolute honor. Absolute honor. One of the original Rosies, I should say.
Let's just say that life doesn't owe me anything.
It never does. You have to make your own way.
And I've been fortunate that I've met the right people.
That's right.
Had a good life, good family, all these things.
Absolutely. Now, if there's anything you want to leave with our listeners, a bit of inspiration, what would that be, Mae?
I just be yourself. I mean, that's the most important. Don't try to be somebody that you're not, but go out and do good things for people.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't. It's amazing because you can't help people like you used to. I remember when I was coming up from a grocery store one day, there was a lady sitting on a curb, and I almost went past her without stopping, and I did. And I says, "Do you need help?" She says, "Well, I walked this far and I can't go any further." And I said, "Well, do you want me to take you home?" She really hesitated before she would get in the car with me. And this is sad because years ago we just thought nothing of that. We just helped whoever needed help.
Yeah, it's a strange new world. Strange new world. We got to be tough. We got to be strong, but we still have to be mindful and compassionate to others. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's going to do it for us, my friends.
You didn't tell me about my mask up in space.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah,
yes,
that's the icing on the cake.
That is the icing on the cake. So before we get out of here, we're going to leave you with one great little story from Mae, and something that Boeing did very special for her. So please share.
I was on the STEM meeting I told you about with the CEO from Boeing and our senator and our congressman. We had 8 schools and 100 students, and the CEO from Boeing says, "Mae, stay on the phone when we're done." He said, "We got a surprise for you." And that's when he told me that they put my face mask, they were going to put my face mask and my bandana on their mannequin, Rosie the Riveter, that was going into their space, their capsule. And that was their first unmanned space capsule up to the International Space Station. And they did. In the first year, it didn't go up. They had problems when it was on the, what do they call it, where it was docked. And so when it went up last year, I got to watch, they had them film me while I was watching it go up. Oh, it was so fascinating. And to think that I had a piece of my, what I built, what I was doing. Right. And when I came back, it showed when they opened the capsule, you could read my bandana where I wrote "To the Moon and the Stars," my name and my Rosie the Riveter. And when I was in Washington last Monday, they had framed it, and they gave it back to me in a frame.
Oh, my gosh.
And then they gave me a coin that had gone up into the space too, and that's so rewarding. Very nice.
Absolutely. I couldn't even imagine that type of honor.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, that's crazy. But to your fact, it is the
Yeah.
icing on the cake to an incredible story.
But I'm not done yet.
No.
If I got a few years to go, I'm going to keep working.
Absolutely. And it seems like you've got the fire to go another 20.
I hope so. Like I said, my mind tells me I can do it, but my body's not always agreeing.
Sure, absolutely. Well, hopefully, we get some. AI comes out with the something that keeps us going longer. I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure it's right around the corner. But it's been fascinating and such a joy to spend some time with you today,
Thank
Mae.
you.
And with everybody at home, I hope you guys had a similar experience listening to some of these great stories. And you can hear more because Mae is out there and she's doing incredible things. You're in town here in San Antonio for some speaking engagements, as I understand.
Yeah, Brandy brought me down. She's got her hands full.
That's right. That's right. So if people want to are you on social media? Where can people find you?
Oh, up on a Rosie. I'm on Facebook too.
All right.
Yeah. So it's nice.
Very good. We will put you'll be able to find the links in the chats or in the section below. So take a look. Fascinating stories of an incredible time in American history, and such an incredible honor to be part of this conversation. So from us here at American Grit to all of you at home, we hope you had a great time listening to some fascinating stories of Mae Krier, one of the original Rosie the Riveters, and her love for the B-17. We'll see you again very soon. And remember, as always, be kind to one another and wash those stinking hands. See you soon.